Good afternoon, church. We're so glad that you tuned in with us for another weekly devotion. Today, what we're going to be doing is looking at Romans 8:18 through 25. This is what Paul writes. For I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory that is to be revealed to us. For the creation waits with eager longing for the revealing of the sons of God. For the creation was subjected to futility not willingly, but because of him who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself will be set free from its bondage to corruption and obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God. For we know that the whole creation has been groaning together in the pains of childbirth until now. And not only the creation, but we ourselves who have the first fruits of the Spirit, we groan inwardly as we await eagerly for adoption as sons, the redemption of our bodies. For in this hope we were saved. Now, hope that is seen is not hope. For who hopes what he sees? But if we hope for what we do not see, we wait for it with patience. So a few weeks ago, I talked about the idea of love never ending. And that was the first part of 4 talks that I want to do on heaven. Now, when I say heaven, I don't mean this pie in the sky, happy, disembodied, American dream realized version of heaven. I'm talking about the biblical view of heaven, which is talking about the renewal of all things. And today I want to talk about a different aspect of heaven. And it's really how we live in light of heaven now. And it's longing for the glory that is to be revealed. This is what we see in this section. We see it really in verse 18. Paul points out these things. And 3 things I want to talk about. Briefly point out. 1, I want to talk about the suffering of this present time and the waiting we do. The suffering and the waiting. 2, I want to talk about the glory that is to be revealed to us and in us. And 3, I want to talk about how we patiently live in light of both. So the suffering we're in now and the waiting we're in now, the glory that's to come, and how we live in light of both. First, the suffering. You see, the whole point of this section, Paul begins by a comparison, or really a lack of comparison, because the comparison is so outlandish. He says it's not even worth comparing the present suffering to the joy that will be revealed to us. He constantly wants to consider this tension between the two, right? But first we need to realize the first aspect, the suffering. You see, a lot of people in our culture are tempted to downplay the suffering. They're tempted to look at death and mourning and say things along the lines of, well, that's just part of life. That's just the way things are. A common phrase you'll hear, I think it originated in The Lion King, is the circle of life. And perhaps you, like me growing up, were told, or at least you inculcated the idea that this was biblical Christianity. It's not. It's Disney pagan stoicism, which just blindly accepts the way things are. But what the Bible teaches is that this broken world is not the way things are supposed to be. This is why Jesus weeps when he sees Lazarus is going to die, because it's not the way things are supposed to be. And that's the biblical view of suffering. It's not the circle of life. What we're told in verses 19 and 21 is that all of creation and we ourselves, we being the children of God, are waiting with eager longing. The Greek word there gives the connotation of our head is stretching forward. It's a word that's only used in Christian literature to talk about this. We already have God's love, but we haven't fully yet experienced it. We haven't fully yet grasped it in the renewal of all things that is to come. And we, as well as creation, are groaning, waiting, always waiting for that to be fully realized. I was walking in the woods here at Gordon Conwell yesterday at dusk, and I was reminded of this waiting, this groaning, because even in the beauty of the woods and of the squirrels running and the birds singing, there was this element of being cut out, of being left out of the eternal joy in which those beauties pointed to. Because even in the greatest moments, the greatest aspects of love and relationships, of walking in the woods, of seeing national parks, that there's still a sense that we have that there's something more. And creation itself even has this aspect. The trees, the forests, the lakes. Paul says that they are all in some mysterious way groaning, waiting, longing for the redemption of all things. And it's not even just this unsatisfied joy, but there's also an element of deep injustice, evil, suffering, pain, death. All of it beckons to the reality that this is not the way things are. And you may be tempted to say, okay, well, this is depressing. This is kind of a melancholy perspective on the matter, that always looking at the negative side of things. But I would actually say it's a biblical perspective, because it resists the blind optimism, the ignorance is bliss approach that our culture often has towards death and towards suffering. And it says, yes, there are many joys in this life. Yes, we have a wonderful city in this life, but we don't have a lasting city. We seek the city that is to come. So we need to recognize the present sufferings of this world, but own up to the yearning, to the longing that we have in the world to come. Because, this brings us to our second point, the sufferings of this present world must be put into perspective. They must be seen in light of the glory that is to be revealed into us. This waiting, what we're waiting for, the object of our waiting, that is, it exists. It's real. And it's coming down to be revealed. You see, all of creation and God's redeemed, is what this text tells us, will be set free. That's what we're longing for. Creation, God's people, we're in bondage, and we're longing to be set free. We're longing for our adoption. Now, you may be thinking, aren't we already adopted in Christ? Aren't we already loved? Yes. But there is a mysterious element too, in which our identity, as we talked about a few weeks ago, Colossians 3, that our identities are hidden in Christ. These identities, known in part now, they're true objectively now, but they will be true objectively and subjectively. What I mean by that is, our standing as children of God will be more real to us then than anything else. We only experience this in part, day by day now. This identity as children of God is like a forgotten identity, in a sense, which will be fully remembered and fully revealed in that. We see in a mirror darkly, but then we'll see in full. The love we seek from things other than God will finally be realized in God. That's the glory that is to be revealed to us. And we'll talk a little bit more in the coming weeks about different aspects of what that means. But you may be wondering, how do we live in light of these two things? How do we live in light of first the suffering, but also the glory that is to be revealed? And we're also told we're called to be patient. We're called to be patient. And what Paul means when he says that is he gives this notion of, in this hope we were saved. What he means is that this redemption that is coming, the return of Jesus, is very much connected to the redemption that we had on the cross. You see, the one who saved us and sustains us is going to be the one that fully redeems us and fully makes us his. And this is the tension that we have to live in patience. But we can live in patience because we know what he's done on the cross, and we can trust him, and we can long for the day in which he will make this new. We see this tension, I'll close with this, and one of the final scenes of The Two Towers, The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, is probably one of my favorite scenes of all time. And there's a lengthy quote, but I think it's worth quoting. It's when Sam and Frodo are just completely overwhelmed by what's going on. And Frodo says to Sam, "I can't do this, Sam." And Sam says this, "I know, it's all wrong. By rights, we shouldn't even be here, but we are. It's like in the great stories, Mr. Frodo, the ones that really mattered. Full of darkness and danger they were. And sometimes you didn't want to know the end, because how could the end be happy? How could the world go back to the way it was when so much bad had happened? But in the end, it's only a passing thing. This shadow, even darkness must pass. A new day will come. And when the sun shines, it will shine out the clear. Those were the stories that stayed with you. That meant something, even if you were too small to understand why. But I think I understand. I know now. Folk in those stories had lots of chances of turning back, only they didn't, because they were holding on to something. And Frodo says, "What are we holding on to, Sam?" And Sam goes on to say that there's some good in this world, Frodo, and it's worth fighting for. You see, we have to realize that there is good, that there is glory to be revealed, that is worth fighting for, that is worth being patient and enduring suffering for, and living in light of that. That's what we're called to do. That's the good, the light at the end of the tunnel. That's how we live as Christians, knowing that darkness must pass as we long for the glory that is to be revealed to us.